I live in Washington, D.C., and that means it's the law that you're not allowed to go a day without talking about the next presidential election. And now that the midterms are over, oh, it's on. The 2024 presidential election begins right now, November 9th, 2022. We're continuing now with Governor Scott Walker, who knows a little bit about it because you threw your hat in the ring in 2016. So what? Am I wrong? Is this where candidates who might have a chance in 24 are starting to weigh their options, or have they already been exploring it up until now?
Well, I think many of us saw the speech that Ron DeSantis gave last night and thought that may have very well been the kickoff of the 2024 presidential campaign. But you look at DeSantis's big win, not just running up the score in Florida, but winning decisively in places that historically he and other Republicans hadn't done well in. Miami, Dade County, Palm Beach, other places, making inroads amongst Hispanic and other voters. But as well, you look at Greg Abbott, big win there, even at a time when there was early on some thought that somehow Beto might eat into that. No, Greg Abbott won decisively in Texas. You see a big win for Chris Sununu in New Hampshire, one of the early states with the first in the nation primary. You see other people that people don't talk about. I think Governor Kim Reynolds, I mean, she had a big decisive win that helped carry that state, did better even than Chuck Grassley, who's an institution in the state of Iowa. I think that's a name to watch for. And then, of course, people like Kristi Noem, Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo, they were all out on the campaign trail. But the biggest issue of all, obviously, is what is Donald Trump going to do? Yeah. And I think, particularly for DeSantis, the fact that he's going to have to wait a little while and deal with his own state's budget and other issues there as governor might be a good thing for him to wait and see what shakes out with President Trump.
Let's set President Trump aside for a moment, because obviously there's a lot to unpack and discuss there. Let's stick with DeSantis for a moment, because I don't think it can be overstated. A 19 percentage point win in a state like Florida, for as long as I can remember, going back into the late 80s, Florida has been the toss-up state of all toss-up states. You have to spend so much money when you're running for president to try to get those electoral votes, and a Republican must have them. Nearly impossible for a Republican to win the presidency without Florida. The fact that it looks like it's a lock now for certainly if DeSantis were to run for president, how huge is that strategically for the next presidential election?
Yeah, I think it's unbelievably significant. You look during our lifetime, it was Ohio and Florida. If you win those two key battleground states, and both of those have made a dramatic shift more towards the Republican side. There's obviously other states like mine that are very much in play. But remember, 4 years ago, there were a lot of people that wondered if Ron DeSantis could even win the general election. Right. In fact, his opponent was like the up-and-coming superstar of the party. He's obviously fallen into an awful, horrible place. But DeSantis has not only won re-election, he has strengthened the party, probably helped in many ways Marco Rubio get similarly high numbers, although not quite as high as DeSantis is, and strengthened the party probably for generations to come. I just think it's phenomenal. And think about this with DeSantis. He did it on a variety of things that matter. He did kind of the full spectrum Reagan approach of not just talking about economic issues, although keeping that state open, remarkably important. He made inroads with parents, many of whom were glad that he took the step to keep his kids in school, in person. And you look at the scores there, unlike the rest of the country who saw massive drops in math and reading over the past 2 years, you see students able to sustain their scores in that state. And then on social issues, he's been willing to take on, as you said the other night, woke. Florida's where woke goes to die. Yeah. Not only was it a great line, a great reminder about how active he's been on social issues as well.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that people like about President Trump, certainly, you hear it all the time from Republican voters who were inspired by his style of campaigning and style of governing, is that he fights back. He fights back. He fights back. You hear it all the time. Ron DeSantis fights back, too. Which brings us to President Trump, because he's already lobbed a couple of grenades DeSantis's way. I mean, you've told me you were smart enough to get out of the 2016 race before you got a nickname, right? And now here we got Ron DeSantis has his own nickname already. How does he play this exactly? Does he just stay quiet? Does he let Trump do his thing and then he does his thing? What would you advise?
Well, I think in DeSantis' case, what he did the other day was exactly right. He didn't react to that. The blowback came from others, President Trump ultimately pulled back a little bit because a lot of even his strong allies were saying, wait a minute, DeSantis is a great governor who's up himself on the ballot. If I was DeSantis, he's got, I mean, there's mechanics in the state of Florida that require him to stay focused on being governor at least for the next 6 months or so. I think he needs to continue to be a strong governor, be a strong leader. The beauty of being a governor, you've got, particularly in Florida, we've got some of the biggest media markets in the nation, and the rest of the national media in Washington, New York, and beyond paying attention to it. Being a good governor puts him in a good position. I always said the advantage of being a governor is you can't hide. You either fail or succeed based upon your work, not based on your record. I mean, excuse me, not based on your rhetoric, but based on your record.
I just did one of those old showbiz. You know how the joke is, enough about me, let's talk about you. What do you think of me? And I just did the same thing with Trump. All right, let's talk about Trump. How should DeSantis react to Trump? Let's really talk about Trump now. He said that he's going to make an announcement next week. You expect him to run, and do you think that the results yesterday, which were not as stellar as people were hoping, do you think that that might affect his thinking right now, or at least affect some of the support that he might get from Republicans who are just sort of looking at the lay of the land after last night's results?
Well, I think there's no doubt that he gets in. As I've said repeatedly in the past, I think what he did during his 4-year term, he deserves the ability to run. He deserves the ability to make the case and be treated seriously.
Agreed.
Because on issue after issue, on tax cuts, regulatory reform, judicial appointments, just across the board, his record was phenomenal. Now, does he talk and tweet the way that many of us do in the Midwest? No. But we like doers more than talkers, and the fact that he actually got things done, I think, is remarkable. Lindsey Graham said to me yesterday, I think he's right about this, that Trump getting out early is probably a good sign for everyone, in the sense that we can see how voters respond to that. We can see how they respond and what sort of modifications, if any, he's going to make going forward. If he can, build on that support and build up a case for 2024, then he's in great shape. If he can't, if people start to raise questions about, someone like Dr. Oz or Blake Masters or others that he supported in some of these battleground states, then I think he's going to have a challenge. But in the end, the beauty of this is, it's not you, Larry, it's not me. It's ultimately the primary voters that will get to make the case, not the pundits, not the talking heads, but primary voters. And we'll see if what they want is 4 more years of Donald Trump. And they like his record. The question is, could they get that from someone else without some of the other issues? And that remains to see.
And it sounds like you're saying, if you're a Republican, a prominent Republican, and you're thinking of running, best to keep your powder dry and let's just see how Trump does for the first few months without any opposition. Interesting.
Yeah, I credit that to Lindsey Graham. He pointed that out, but I think it's a smart move. There's no reason, there's always this rush, particularly people talking in Washington, get in.
Yeah.
But I think right now, with Donald Trump, being a totally different factor than we've ever seen before, I mean, the closest you get is back to Grover Cleveland coming back and running after having been out of office. But that's a long, long time ago. Yeah. Wait and see the impact, and then see how things shake out.
Governor Scott Walker, Young America's Foundation, that's YAF.org. Thank you, as always, for giving us your insight. You make us smarter every day. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Larry.
More to come on O'Connor Tonight.